Today, I'm joined by Jordan Wiseman on one of the websites that talks about you. You're described as a serial entrepreneur, um, and honestly, I don't think I've met a lot of people that applies to so perfectly.
I started my first company when I was 20, but I had done a bunch of kind of, entrepreneurial things in high school, many of which failed. So it looks like it was my first one was a success, but you've always got to grease the wheel somehow.
I guess, do you think it's still possible today, or like if it is, then has there any change? Then do you reckon of someone deciding to just create a startup in this kind of tech/gaming environment, or is it? Would you say it's gotten easier, more difficult?
I think both. I think any kind of gaming, PC, console, mobile, or tabletop, the creation of great product is actually easier than ever, right? The challenge is the creation of product is so easy that there's an enormous amount of it.
You talk about on the website how people create chapters within game worlds. How does that work? Do you know how many game worlds they're going to be? What do these chapters look like? Is there a narrative?
So you establish a universe, and at that level, you create things like, well, what are the statistics that govern characters in this universe? What are the classes of characters, if any? What are the, rules of combat, if any? Are there locations that are common or should be available to all people who are going to create stories within this universe? And that's probably the more sophisticated level. So, probably not everybody will go off and create their own universes. We don't anticipate that, right? People will create universes and then open it up for other people or invite other people to create stories within those universes.
How do I get early access? Because I genuinely really want to know. I'm really fascinated by this. Hi guys, welcome back to the Edge podcast. Today I'm joined by Jordan Wiseman. I think on one of the websites that talks about you, you're described as a serial entrepreneur. Um, and honestly, I don't think I've met a lot of people that applies to so perfectly. I mean, from what I can tell you, basically went like straight into kind of entrepreneurialism from the get go. It seems like it's something that you've always enjoyed. I've clearly been quite good at it as well. I've checked through the different, businesses that you started up or ran, and the first one looks like it's still going to this day, which is I think practically unheard of in entrepreneurialism, isn't it? It's like everyone screws up their first one. But what was it? I know you were in the tech space for a while, and like, what was it that ended up kind of catching your eye about the video game space? Because I know you've been there for a number of years now, but it wasn't where you started out.
No, yeah, I mean, I think I started my first company when I was 20, but I had done a bunch of kind of, you know, entrepreneurial things in high school, many of which failed. So it looks like it was my first one was a success, but you've always got to grease the wheel somehow.
Not listing the other one
Yeah,
on LinkedIn.
uh, yeah, those aren't on LinkedIn. FASA started when I was 20. It was focused on the tabletop role playing game and board game space. It's been 43 years and it's still around, which is kind of amazing. Um, uh, and it was, it was a great way to kind of cut my teeth, learn about design and publishing and team building. And then, it was a great foundation to then build from there into our first kind of video game venture, which was Virtual World Entertainment, which really wasn't a video game. It was a location based entertainment, kind of pioneered that term because it wasn't really around before then. But we created virtual reality entertainment facilities in retail malls and locations we started that R&D in 1987 and opened up the first one about 3 years later, end of 89, beginning of 90. And then eventually built, 35 of those sites around the world, and including connecting them together so that you could play tournaments, worldwide tournaments, and kind of did a lot of pioneering on esports long before it was called esports because we had regional, national, and international tournaments broadcast on television, the whole thing as early as '94. So. Um, yeah,
So was that like
around the space
sorry.
for a long time.
Yeah, I do apologise. I do apologise. I didn't mean to interrupt. Feel free to continue.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
I said I apologise if I interrupted. I was just going to ask the VR thing that you mentioned with regards to the like in the shopping malls and stuff. Would that have been like the precursor to those like facilities now, where you go in and like fight zombies in like a VR kind of
Oh,
arena or
yeah,
something like that?
absolutely. Yeah, no, it was definitely the precursor to like the virtual reality and entertainment facilities, and they ran almost identical. I mean, that kind of whole format that we established of creating kind of a pre-show that gets you ready for the experience you're about to have. You can make choices of character choices or equipment, and environment, all those kind of things before you start. Then you went into what we call the launch bay, and everybody got into their cockpits. You then could, talk to each other over simulated radio as you've piloted your vehicles around the virtual environment. And then something we did, which a lot of VR centers don't do, and to their detriment, is we had a post show where you would get together, and we had captured all of the network events that took place and used those to reconstruct a movie of the game you just played. So now,
Oh, that is awesome.
yeah, so the whole team is kind of brought back together. Everybody, all the players, both teams are brought back together, and that's actually where a lot of the magic happens. Because when you see it as that movie, you're like, oh wait, you're the guy that snuck up behind me and hit me in the back. Oh, and you get those kind of conversations, and it breaks down the kind of social barriers between people who didn't come in as a group, and fires you up to go play again. Yeah, I think that kind of third act is really important.
It surprises me that people aren't doing that more often. Like it seems like such a simple thing. Like even outside of the VR space, like it's something that they do some in some like kind of I know like laser tag or paintball. You get like various like kind of overviews on the after game of like this happened and this happened. It's like why
Well,
wouldn't you be
we yeah
doing the
we
same thing but to a higher level in VR?
absolutely. I mean, we started by doing printouts, like you get like in a laser tag thing, right? We started with that long before there was laser tag, but you would get not only kind of the statistics, but we then created a narrative, a story that you created as you did your experience, and it was designed to be from your perspective. So it would be like, if you did all these incredibly cool things would be listed on yours. If you just kind of walked around, it would talk about how you just walked around, you know.
Yeah.
And so, but those, that kind of turning the virtual into physical, right? The fact that it was like a printed piece of paper that had that story and all the stats on it had a really big emotional impact because it was like a permanence to this thing that was ethereal, you know.
Yeah, yeah, and I can imagine that like there's a yeah, even like there's so many elements to that because it's almost like a word of mouth marketing thing as well. Because then people are going to be taking that off and be like, they'll go home and they'll be like, look at this is awesome. Like I was able to
Yeah,
do it, and then I got this down, and there's probably a kid
yeah.
somewhere they're going to stuck up on the fridge. Like,
Well, and so we learned a lot about doing multiplayer 3D games, which is when we worked with Activision on the MechWarrior 1 and 2 series, to help bring that, the learnings we had there to them. And then we started developing those in house, which was beginning of what we called Fast Interactive, which was kind of the third company in the history, and that then got acquired by Microsoft, which is how I ended up in Seattle, and I became creative director for all Microsoft games, reporting to Ed Freeze. Um,
yeah, I noticed that. That was because I didn't understand that. Not that like not in a bad way, but I remember looking at it being like, wow, that is a jump from going into like what looks essentially to be a almost a startup or a small company environment to all of a sudden creative director at Microsoft.
yeah, it was, and that's what was exciting about it to me, because I'd been working on my own. I mean, I'm on my own. I had the incredible benefit of great teams and partners, but I didn't have a boss, and was always in our own startups where we're always struggling for resources and figuring out how to do a lot with very little. And it was exciting to join Microsoft, where that was not the challenge, right? As creative director for the org, when I joined, it was about a 300-person team, and we were focused exclusively on PC. But then, a couple years into that, we launched the Xbox project, and at that point, we blew up to about 1,500 people, and countless projects that I was flying all around the world, going, make it blue. I don't know, maybe. What if we call him Charlie? So because it was being a creative director on across that many projects, and that was stuff was really an interesting and new challenge for me. And I think my experience at Microsoft was very, very positive, and also very challenging. I found, it was the exact opposite of what it was when I was an entrepreneur, because I had unlimited resources, and yet it was harder to get things done, right?
Yeah.
Because just because of the kinds of things that a big company has to struggle with that a startup doesn't, right? We can make decisions. I always say that an entrepreneur or a startup, your only competitive advantage against a big company is that you can make 10 decisions in the time it takes them to make one. And if 6 or 7 are right, you win, right?
Yeah, there's no bureaucracy there.
Yeah. But you can't sacrifice that advantage, right? You have to be willing to make decisions quickly and to be wrong, right? If you give up that, then you don't have any advantages, right? Because they have all the resources and you don't. And that was a new, kind of learning how to deal with those challenges of decision making and large team organization, and the bureaucracy that comes from uh, you know giant organizations that are often not aligned for what they're trying to be, was all new learnings for me. So, but I enjoyed the challenge. It was really fun. And it was, I mean, and in terms of a career in video games, being creative director for one of the primary platforms is certainly a pinnacle kind of position.
Yeah, it's one for the history books, isn't it? But
Yeah, yeah.
I guess, do you think it's still possible today, or like if it is, then has there any change? Then do you reckon of someone deciding to just create a startup in this kind of tech slash gaming environment, or is it? Would you say it's gotten easier, more difficult?
I think both. It's both in I think any kind of gaming, PC, console, mobile, or tabletop. I think the challenges are kind of similar, which is you've got better access to incredible. I mean, you've got incredible tools available to you, right? Which weren't available 40 years ago. You've got a worldwide talent pool that's available to you. That in the 40 years ago was very hard to try to coordinate or identify talent across the world, and work with them in a collaborative, quickly in a collaborative sense. Um, so the creation of great product is actually easier than ever, right? The challenge is the creation of product is so easy that there's an enormous amount of it, right?
Yeah.
So it used to be the challenge was making it. Now the challenge is getting anyone to pay attention that you've made it. And so they're two very different challenges. But that's why I'm saying it's both much easier and much harder than it used to be.
Yeah, I mean, I can completely understand that. I remember when I was younger, I wanted to like. I think as most kids that love video games do at one point or another, that I was like, right, I'm going to make a game and I'm going to get it on Steam. And so as I was like beginning to understand the monumental task of learning how to animate code and design a game by yourself, um, I also was doing research on how you sell a game, and it was like, oh my god, the amount of projects that get greenlit every single day and just fall into the ether is like astounding. That if you look at the curve of indie games and success, I forget the name of them, but it's one of those ones where it's like it's always nothing, always nothing, always nothing, and at the very end, you've got this crazy sharp incline of the tiny, tiny percent that kind of go viral or like have a great marketing campaign, and everyone hears about it and wants to buy it.
Well, yeah, and my current project that I'm working on called Endless Adventures is really a continuation of this flow that we're talking about, right? We're creating a no code narrative game authoring system so that designers and artists and writers can make very sophisticated story centric games, anything from kind of text based choose your own path to isometric RPGs. Without having to incorporate engineers, which I think is going to hopefully bring a lot more people into the ability to create, stories from their perspective, which I'm very excited about because, I think right now the diversity of people creating games is much lower than the diversity of people playing games.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that this can be a small step in, you know, creating, you know, balancing that equation. I also, frankly, built this because selfishly, I wanted to be able to experiment a lot more. And, even when you have the benefit of having, your own software teams available, they're expensive and you can't afford to have them sitting around long. So you don't have a lot of time to do kind of long iteration loops of experimentation between designers and engineers because that's a pretty long loop and it's expensive
Yeah. I
to
mean,
do
that was
it.
one of the things I was really wanted to talk to you about actually. This, so I was researching this thing you're working on at the moment, and it fascinated me, but I'm not sure I completely like understood it. So you talk about on the website how people create chapters within game worlds. So how does that work? Do you know how many game worlds are going to be? What do these chapters look like? Is there a narrative, or can
Well,
you not talk about it?
no, I can talk about it a little. We're going to be becoming more and more public about it over the upcoming months. Um, but yeah, it's kind of a multi-tiered authoring system. So at the highest level, we have what we're currently calling universe. We'll see if that actually ends up being the name. But so you establish a universe, and at that level, you create things like, well, what are the statistics that govern characters in this universe? What are the classes of characters, if any? What are the rules of combat, if any? Are there locations that are common or should be available to all people who are going to create stories within this universe, or characters that should be available? And so you establish the kind of the foundations of the universe and elements that you want to be available to all people who are going to write stories within it at this universe level. And that's probably the more sophisticated level. So probably not everybody will go off and create their own universes. We don't anticipate that, right? People will create universes and then open it up for other people or invite other people to create stories within those universes, right? And that story authoring then kind of builds on top of what the universe is. So you don't have to reestablish all the characters or the fundament, like combat rules or classes or any of those kind of things, right? And any characters or content that was created at the universe level, characters, environments, locations, terrain, props, anything like that are immediately available to you at the story level. And so then you can go off and create your own games within that universe, right? And that could be anything again from a kind of choose your own adventure all the way up to a CRPG, dating sims or branching narrative stories, whatever you want to create within that universe. And then you can also at that story level, if there are assets that aren't at the universe level, images, character models, environment pieces that you want to create for your locations, you can upload those, create those, and upload those into the system at that tier. So you're not limited to the content that's at the universe. You just inherit all the content to the universe, and then you can add whatever content you want at the bottom. And then you use a series of different modules, right? So you establish each story is built out of scenes, and so you create a new scene, and then within that scene, we have a series of modules that are scene events. So you can say, oh, I want to use a conversation node where Bob is going to talk to Sally, right? So I drop that into the scene graph. It's a visual graph, and I then say, okay, and the outcome of that is that if Bob kisses Sally, then we go to this scene event, which is a combat event, and you drop that module in, and then you specify the location and the character models and or so on. So you build it out of these kind of modules that bring it together. And you can do very sophisticated logic, but again, her goal was not to be able to have people learn a new scripting language because a scripting language is so close to coding that it might as well be
Yeah.
code.
At that
Um,
point, you might as well be getting people to learn to code.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So we've evolved this kind of unique Mad Lib sentence generator that uses contextually populated drop-down menus. So anytime I create a character or a location or a tag or whatever, it automatically populates into the appropriate drop-downs. And so I use the drop-downs to create the sentences. And that way you have the power of language for describing what you want to do, but you don't have to worry about any kind of syntax. Um,
Yeah, it's almost like I don't like this is like a Neanderthal explanation, but it's almost like a more elegant, more complex version of kind of I forget what they're called, but like there's drag and drop engines. Like I remember when I was learning to make video games, and it was kind of like there would be like set pieces of code that you could drag and drop into your scene.
right. Well, yeah. I guess it's kind of like it's a one step abstraction from that. But yes, that is I think kind of related in terms of how we do logic. So you establish in anything you want, you can establish what are the conditions under which this runs, and then if it does run, what are the outcomes that it does. And so yeah, it's been super exciting. I've been working on it kind of in the background for about 4 years, and then really started to you know ramp up the team about 18 months ago. Um, uh, yeah, and yeah, I'm just super jazzed about it. So, and
Well, it's
then
fascinating as well because I've noticed
I'm sorry.
a bit of a rise. So sorry. There's a bit of a rise recently in the video game industry, especially where it's like there's almost like a democratization of for game creators in the industry, where like we saw with film a while back, where it was like now anyone can shoot quite high quality film, or it's a lot easier to shoot films. You've still got these big, massive film studios, the way you probably also always had
Absolutely.
these like AAA studios, but we're seeing the same shift in video games with all of the kinds of software like this and technology that's coming out that was the equivalent of people getting access to things like YouTube and the iPhone that just
Yeah,
massively
exactly. I think that's
democratized.
a very good analogy. Absolutely. And then the other part of that is as we mentioned the challenge of distribution and awareness, right? And in our case, you publish when you we wanted to make it simpler for you to get your game out, so you don't have to go create like you did when you were a kid, create your own account on Steam and set up a bank account and all those kind of things in a corporate if I could I've it's always a hassle for to set it up for iOS, for Android, for Steam, blah blah blah. So in our case, you just hit the button and it publishes it into the app, into our client. But I think one of the things that I think is very important, especially for narrative games, is often narrative games are not designed for everybody, right? I've created this with a particular audience in mind. It may be just for a friend. It may be for a group of friends or a church group or whatever like a particular group of fans of Doctor Who, and I only want them to see it. I don't want it to be going into general distribution. And so that's one of the key things we're working on is being able to be very selective as a creator for who gets to see and play your content. And then when you're ready, if ever, you can then publish it to the whole world and within the app, and everybody can see it. But I think it's important to give the creators the control over who sees it and when, who sees it and when.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I was talking to a guy who posted an indie game recently. He released it, and he'd been working on it for like a couple of years, and then had kind of gone out on LinkedIn and kind of told the world, like, hey, I made this game. And so I went and played this game, and I hopped on like a video call with him, told him how much I liked it, and we were discussing like the fear of actually promoting your own creations. It's one of those things of like the fear is necessarily that people won't like it. It's that
Yeah,
people won't care half the time, or that it gets like zero like traction, and you like put your heart out to the world, and everyone just kind of goes like, "Yeah, not interested."
yeah, and we can't solve that problem entirely, but at least we can try to give you more control over it. But
Yeah,
anytime you're creating something, you are putting your heart out on out in public, and you have to get ready for people to step on it. So,
Big time, big time. So, are you guys planning on having a way for creators to like monetize any of their creations within this, or is
yeah,
it pure?
if creators want to monetize their content, they can, and there's a revenue share kind of system based upon like if they used one of our like if they started with one of the universes we created, then there's one share. If they created it from clean sheet of paper, they get a bigger share, kind of things like that. So yeah, I don't know if that'll be there on day one when we're in early access, but that is the intention that we empower people to monetize it. Absolutely.
Awesome. Just for everyone listening, by the way, just want to make it clear. For the question I'm about to ask, I'm not. I haven't come on this podcast to promo this or anything. I'm just genuinely fascinated. How do I get early access? Because I genuinely really want to know. I'm really fascinated by this.
Yeah, we can. We'll talk offline. Happy to do that because I actually love to get people like yourself, in and giving feedback early. That would be great. So.
Awesome, awesome stuff. I had a moment suddenly where I was like, had a suspicion that people listening would be going, hang on a second, am I being led down a sales funnel? And I was like, no, 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 I promise. I'm not a sellout. I just really, really want to know. But
That'd be great. That'd be great.
that's awesome. So I mean, it seems like you're doing quite a bit of like innovative stuff in the space at the moment then, because you're still working at, if I'm not mistaken, Naughty Dog as well, right?
Oh no, I was never at Naughty Dog. There's the internet for you because
Oh, really?
yeah, no, I've never been at Naughty Dog. No, I most recently my last couple of companies was Harebrained Schemes, which I founded with Mitch Gittleman, and I'm super excited that they're just announced
I
we
know
got
I
a
did. It was because it had a dog in the logo. It's just
oh wow.
me and my like silly head. It's Project Archer, and
Ah yes, okay, yeah, that was yeah. So
I was
so yeah,
looking at the Naughty Dog website about an hour ago, and the two wires must have gotten crossed.
no worries. Um,
That's why I need to
yeah,
start
so
keeping notes on these talks.
yeah, so Harebrained Schemes, was a studio found of Mitch, and that we did the Shadowrun RPGs, and then we did BattleTech, and then I had the pleasure of working with Chris Rogers to kind of conceive of a new game, which then he spent the last 4 years doing the hard work of actually making into a real thing, and it's coming out this year. I'm super excited about, called the Lamplighters League, and I think it looks great. It's very just so excited for what they've done there. And then, as you said, Project Archer is where I left HBS to found Project Archer, which was a stealth project for several years. It's a team that we built focused exclusively on glasses-based augmented reality, more. And then just about 6 months ago or so, we acknowledged that it's actually a division of Walmart, which was another interesting experience working for a large company. Um, and but that was a really exciting project. I've always been a very big believer in the impact of AR. I mean, having been in VR since 1987, I think I really understand its potential and its limitations. And I've never believed that VR is a transformational technology. And what I mean by transformational technology is, I mean one that actually changes how we changes our society and changes our economy, right? The web, for instance, is a transformational technology. It completely changed everything about us, right? Smartphones. Smartphones were transformational technology, right? They changed how we interact with each other, how we interact with the world, and became a very large economic driver. And I believe that the two things that we see in our near future that have that impact are AI, obviously starting to have that impact immediately, and I think AR, glasses based AR, will have that kind of level of impact on our world. Um, and so it was an exciting opportunity to really get out ahead of that world, of that universe, and do early experimentation in the technology, and more importantly in the interaction, the human to digital interaction inside of the real world, and how you build user interfaces for those kind of things, and start deal with the issues of, well, if I'm really walking around in a store, am I, talking to virtual characters? Am I gesturing in the air? Am I, how do I interact with this incredibly rich digital content that's being overlaid on top of the physical world?
So yeah, I mean when do you see the future of kind of AI in the retail space going then? Because is it going to be one of those things where in the far future everyone's just going to be wearing their AR glasses, like carry around an iPhone with us today, and you'll see stuff, or do you think it's more the case of like stores will have specific AR showcases set up for things like clothing and stuff like that?
I think my feeling is that from all the research we've done, we are within a handful of years away from uh, having a set of glasses that are just slightly more encumbrance than a current set of glasses that overlay digital objects on top of the physical world. They have enough cameras to be able to understand the world around us, and they, have the, connected through connected through cellular, high-speed cellular, so that most of the processing is being done off board and edge computing, and streamed to you in real time. To be able to, to have an incredibly rich holographic environment, projected on top of the real world. And I think that's going to have a huge impact on everything we do. Right? I mean, from how we walk around, navigate. Right? I mean, if you have a GPS heads-up display available at all times, right? You're walking. If you're hungry, you say, "Show me Yelp for reviews," and they're just projected on top of the restaurants as you walk down. If you if cars have engines still and you open up the hood, and you're like, where's the distributor cap? It's like, here it is, and here's an animation of how to change it physically right on top of the actual item, right? IKEA furniture gets a lot easier to build. Everything, everything becomes contextual to the actual items and world that you're in. You
I mean, that's so exciting. I personally, I think I'm just waiting for the day when I can go for like a jog in the morning. I have a horde of zombies behind me or something that's just kind of keeping me going along.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So I think it's and like all powerful technology, there are some very scary cases, the use cases that we have to be conscious of, and privacy concerns that we have to be aware of. But yeah, I think the technology is super exciting and can be super empowering. And so that's why we built Project Archer. My wife and I started that for Walmart, and I love building teams, and it was great. We built just a fantastic team there, and now we're off on our next adventures, and they're continuing to do great work there.
Nice. Well, honestly, mate, thank you. I think that's wrapped up almost perfectly within the 30-minute mark. So I really appreciate you coming on and everything. Um, but yeah, that was episode one. I'll just stop it there.
All right. Well, my pleasure. Great. Thanks for reaching out and great talking.